I am Positively Kris Pace, and you are actively listening to Conversations with Kris.
All right, guys. Today we've got a very special guest, the man, myth, the legend, Whiz Matthew. It's the last name. Do we need to get into that? I think Whiz is where we just stop with you because it's such a cool name. And can we go into that story? Hey, you know what? Welcome to the show today, and thank you for joining me. I'm very excited to have a conversation with you. And tell us about you and the summary version, then we'll break it all down.
Yeah, man. Former Navy F-18 Hornet fighter pilot, graduated from the Navy Fighter Weapons School that, most people know as Top Gun. Flew some combat sorties over southern Iraq, off of Abraham Lincoln and Kitty Hawk. And then, yeah, man, started the No Fallen Heroes Foundation after some childhood trauma, military trauma, and Wall Street trauma. A lot of shitty stuff in life that brought me to being on my knees, spiraling the drain, and pulling out of that nosedive with a little bit of yoga, a little bit of meditation, and a hell of a lot of psychedelic-assisted therapy. So there's your executive summary, man.
That is plenty to work with. So let's stop for just a second. Okay. Obviously, there's not very many fighter pilots in the whole world ever, but also, how few fighter pilots actually go to Top Gun?
Man, it's a fraction of a decimal point. So yeah, usually in one squadron, you'll get a guy or a gal to go to Top Gun. We call it going to the mountain. You go up to the mountain, you get your flowing robes and your knowledge, and you go back to your squadron. And while at Top Gun, you're also taught to be a teacher.
Okay.
So you go back to your squadron and you get everybody up to speed with the latest Gucci tactics and weapon systems and stuff like that. So, Top Gun's to make you elite, but it's also to make you a teacher to go make other people elite as well. So when I went through Top Gun, I actually went through the bad guy course. So there's kind of two courses. There's the good guy course where Navy and Marines are going through a longer program to get brilliant, but they have to fly against bad guys.
Okay.
So I went through what is called the adversary course. So I went and studied, you had to be a really good guy to be selected to be a good bad guy. Yeah. So, I went up there, I knew almost as much about a MiG-29 and Su-27 and their missiles and everything in their tactics than I did the F-18.
Right.
Because we had to, be able to present the most realistic bad guy scenarios that the good guys were going to face. So it was pretty cool being a bad guy up at Top Gun. Our alphabet agencies do a pretty cool job of going out and acquiring enemy radar systems and enemy surface air missiles. Right.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you fly the bad guy plane against the good guys as like for training exercises?
Yeah. So, my F-18 was painted like an enemy, MiG. And then I was also in control of all the ground stuff. So we had what was called an IADS, an integrated air defense. So I had command. We had missile batteries on the ground, like enemy SA-6s and S-400 air defense systems that we borrowed from people around the globe. So when the good guys were ingressing into the targets in Fallon, they were getting lit up by no shit real enemy radar that they would be seeing overseas. And then they were getting, attacked by guys like me who were supposed to die for the fatherland type of stuff.
Yeah. All the way up to kamikaze pilot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was cool. Yeah.
That one in the training exercises.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, Top Gun was cool. It was a good time. It kind of sucked for me though, because I was an instructor pilot in the F-18 down in El Toro. That's how old I am. I was in El Toro when it was still open. And then we closed El Toro and went down to Miramar in San Diego.
How many years is this about? What time were you?
97, I was in El Toro, and then down to Miramar 98 through 2000.
Okay.
And then, so I was teaching a lot of young Navy Marine aviators how to fly and fight the Hornet. Well, when I went to Top Gun 12 years later, all those students that I beat the hell out of, a bunch of them were Top Gun instructors at the time. So they returned
back on it.
They returned the favor and pounded me into the dirt, which was great because I went through Top Gun as a reservist. So from 2000 to 2006, I was flying F-18s out of Naval Air Station Fort Worth,
Okay.
and I went out there in 2003 or four to Top Gun, and so I went through as a long-haired, dirty boot, slack-jawed reservist, and
And
they had
ended
a
up
lot of
in Top
fun
Gun.
picking
That's a
on
bad guy.
me.
You
Yeah,
became the good guy that was the bad guy. Now you said you come from a troublesome childhood as well. Yeah, so you had rough upbringing.
yeah.
So was it, did you know you always were going to fly F-18s and then change the world afterwards, or was that not like part of the? Are you just winging it and just doing what I did, which was I'm in for anything I want that you guys want me to do, but up until I wanted to fly jets, like that was what I wanted to do. So I
Yeah.
didn't know that my whole life, though. I come from a terrible childhood, just like a lot of us that have made it through it in the world. But yeah, did you end up like as a kid dreaming of being a pilot, or was it just kind of like
Yeah,
a
so yeah, my dad was in the military. When Vietnam rolled around, he already had four kids, so he couldn't go. But his dad was, a Navy cook on a submarine in the Pacific, and I had like I can't even count how many uncles were in World War II. Battle of the Bulge, Iwo Jima, all that type of
wow?
stuff. So kind of a military family. But my best friend across the street growing up, his dad flew fighters for the New Jersey Air National Guard out of Atlantic City International. And he also flew for Eastern Airlines. And this guy, was larger than life. He drove a Trans Am and, he had his orange flight suit on. And, back when I was a kid in the 80s, we were in the middle of a Cold War, man. Like a no shit, this is, duck and cover under your desk type of thing. So he would launch on alert, like scramble fighter jets out of Atlantic City to intercept Russian bombers or Soviet bombers that were going up and down the coast, kind of testing our airspace. And I'll never forget. So I was always enthralled in fighter aviation. And then obviously, if you're going to be doing something cool, you want to do it landing aboard the boat to make it even harder. But I
Amazing.
remember, one morning, my buddy across the street and I were walking to the bus stop at the top of this hill in our neighborhood, and his dad came out in his flight suit, and he's like, "Hey, when you guys get off the bus in the afternoon, don't go anywhere, just stay there." And I'm like,
Okay.
we don't need a ride. Yeah, we don't need a ride. It's like right up the hill. I don't know why, but we got off the bus and we're just kind of hanging out, looking around, and within about 5-10 minutes, just this dot. I was looking across the bay towards Atlantic City. I see this smoking dot, and before I knew it, this F-106 was on top of us. He pulled straight up, full afterburner. It blew us over, dirt in our hair and rocks in our teeth, and books flying all over the place. And I said, "Yeah, that's
That's
what
what
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
do."
do. You're like, that's the coolest man I've ever seen in my life, and I want to be that cool.
Yeah.
And
So sadly, I knew at a young age, I used to watch, Midway with my dad, or the Flying Leathernecks type of stuff. My dad and I would watch, World War II movies and stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to be a naval aviator. But in high school, man, I'm really aging myself. In 1986, I was a junior. I was studying hard because I knew I wanted to either go to the academy or get an ROTC scholarship, and I want to fly. And then, Top Gun comes out. I'm like, son of a bitch. So the movie
Brilliant.
comes out, and now everybody wants to fly
Right.
fighter jets
You just created
for
all
the
your
Navy.
competition.
It was brutal. It sucked. So I went to school down here in Florida at Jacksonville University. I wasn't smart enough to get into the academy. So ROTC guy in Jacksonville. And it's funny, man. You as you know, former Navy guy, you live by the gouge, you die by the gouge. Well, the gouge at the time, the Navy and the Marine Corps started transitioning from, hey, you can be an idiot and fly airplanes. I remember before the movie Top Gun came out in 1985, they were putting classified ads in the New York Times.
Are you
Hey,
serious?
oh yeah, you can
Looking
Google it,
for a
man.
fighter pilot. Are you
Look,
interested?
you want to fly for the Navy, and
Do you have a high school diploma?
they couldn't pay guys to do this, right? But when I got into JU, I remember my naval science instructor saying, what do you want to major in? I'm like, political science. He's like, you can't. You have to be an engineer to be a pilot. You have, mechanical engineer, air, physics. I'm like, so I picked up the phone and I called a couple buddies who had gone years before me, and they're like, don't listen to it. That's a lie. I was a forestry major, right? When you graduate, they're going to look at the majority is going to be your GPA and a little bit's your major and some other stuff. They're like, don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. I'm like, all right, I won't. So my motto was poli-sci, skate on by, get to fly. So, I drank my ass off. I partied. I had a great GPA, but a bunch of my buddies listened to them. They were miserable for 4 years, studying mechanical engineering, getting a 2.0, 2.5. And then as luck would have it, or luck for me, not for them, in 1991, when I got commissioned, that's when the Berlin Wall came down and ain't no Soviet Union and the peace dividend, right?
Yep.
So like in the blink of an eye, they cut the pilot slots in half. So, you could have gotten a 2.0 with your engineering degree and still flown jets. Not the year I got commissioned, man. They all got screwed. They ended up driving boats and being supply officers and stuff
After
like
4
that.
years
So
of going to engineering school too, that's like worst case.
it was bad news, man. So that kind of trained me for my naval career. I'm like, I'm not going to leave anything to chance. I'm always going to be the best. So I went to primary flight training, at Whiting. I had a little bit of prior flight time. I went to Embry-Riddle for a year in Daytona before I went to JU. So I had my private license and I knew my way around an airplane. So I did really well in primary, selected jets. And then, again, as you remember, back then, the Navy had a lot of jets. They had S-3, they had, anti-submarine planes, they had jammers, they had tankers, they had all sorts, Tomcats, A6s, Hornets. I knew I wanted to fly Hornets. So, I studied my ass off in advanced jet training and ended up selecting Hornets and, got assigned out in Lemoore out to the West Coast.
Wow. What a story, man. That's crazy. I was actually, I went in 96, got out in 2002. I was in the Air Force, on Navy, but I was
That's right.
I'm from Daytona. So I lived in Daytona, which was like the worst place you could ever live, unless you wanted to go to Embry-Riddle University, which crazy that your path crossed into there. And then I moved to Jacksonville when I got out of the service. My process was like what you said. I went in and enlisted. I didn't have the support to be able to go in any other way. Even though I had a full ride scholarship for football, I couldn't go because I had no sports. So I had to go in the military and earn my way in. But I did exactly what you did. I was like, I'm going to be the best. So I made rank, got promoted quickly. Anyway, ended up going back to college, and they only accepted me through the ROTC, through a commissioning program for enlisted troops, because I took an engineering degree. They turned me down for a business degree. And so I had to go to engineering school. I didn't want to be an engineer. I just wanted to fly planes. So
exactly,
it was torture, man. I had to go through all that crazy stuff. But man, just to become, first of all, I'd love to know what it's like to land on a boat with a jet. Like, what does this feel like? There's got to be a
during the day, it's a sport of kings. It's a great time. It's an adrenaline rush. First time I landed on a boat, I think it was the USS America. I think I shaved this morning with the USS America. It's that's how old I am. It was off of Key West, man. You do you do hundreds and hundreds of landings at the field, right? There's an aircraft carrier landing area painted on the runway. We have the meatball on the side of the runway, and you do hundreds of approaches at the field because it's muscle memory. Turn here, pull the power back, add this, look out here at this point, your altitude. So it's monkey skills, man. But man, when I launched out of Naval Air Station Key West and looked down at the USS Saratoga, I'm like, there's no way I'm landing on that thing, man.
Was that your first
one? That was my first one. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. See, that's the one I want to know about. Because was it like pucker effect then? Like you were like, oh, don't crash.
You don't even. I don't even remember it because it was just so. You're in a zone. Yeah, everything's moving, and you're in it. When you roll behind the ship for the first time, it's a carrier. It ain't the runway at the field. There's smoke coming out of the top. There's a wake. There's people yelling on the radio.
It is, man. I can't even imagine.
It's a crazy experience. And then after you land for the first time, hook up and they're taxiing you right over to the catapult to get airborne again. So you don't even have time to think before boom, your first catapult shot is as crazy as the landing, 0 to 100 50 miles an hour in a second and a half. I
And
mean,
it
it's
doesn't
just,
look like you're gonna fly when you should get shot off those. It looks like they're gonna go right off the edge, and they just somehow the perfect. I guess it's just amazing.
yep.
It's incredible. But I've always thought, actually, when I was thinking of Navy or Air Force for pilots, I was like, I love Top Gun. I love the whole F-18 idea, but I don't know that landing on the boat thing. That was my hang up with that. So I was like, I'd rather just stay with
Yeah.
the air. And plus, it was like, if I don't get a fighter pilot job, I can at least go into cargo. I can at least fly, which was what I wanted to do.
Exactly.
Which, didn't happen, obviously. But man, what a cool, incredible story and situation. Reserve. JU, that's not a big school. I lived in
No,
Jacksonville for a decade.
2,500 people, I think, when I
Yeah,
was
that's a
there.
really
Yeah.
small place. And then to end up where you're at as the best of the good guys to be a bad guy and then running the exercises you ran. So how long were you in for total?
15 years total. Yep.
15.
15
Yeah.
years.
Wow.
10 active and 5.5 reserve. Yep.
And you ran a bunch of missions and had a bunch of stuff go on, or you mostly
Yeah, well, I don't, I got a couple strike flight air medals for flying Operation Southern Watch missions over Iraq, but I go out of my way to tell people I have zero combat experience. I mean, says it on the certificate. The scariest part of my Operation, Southern Watch no fly zone missions was landing back aboard the boat at night, low on fuel and bad weather. The toughest flying I did in my career in the F-18 was at Top Gun. It wasn't flying over the skies of Iraq. So yeah, I go out of my way to say, no, man, I didn't see. I mean, I think we got maybe shot at a couple times, but this was back in the mid 90s where Bill Clinton was in charge. He didn't want to do anything and rock the boat. So you had to get punched in the face, go home, land aboard the boat, say they tried to do something,
right.
and then they'd think if they want to respond. And of course they almost never did. So yeah, my missions over Iraq were kind of a joke.
Now you said you did have some people that you lost while you were in the service, other pilots. So where were that? What's that happening at? I know that.
So before you
training exercises.
So before you go on deployment on the boat, you actually have to get ready to go on deployment on the boat. So you go up to Fallon, Nevada. You drop bombs and you make little rocks out of big rocks. Then you go out to the boat for the month off San Diego. Then you go back to Fallon because you forgot how to drop bombs. I mean, so it's, it's called workups.
Yeah.
So during workups, we lost 5 aircraft.
Wow.
And 8 air crew. We hadn't even turned west to head to Iraq yet. And it was the first time in the history of naval aviation that an air wing, an aircraft carrier, was ordered into port to do a safety stand down. And some of these mishaps were national news. The first one that happened when I reported to my squadron was Kara Holtgren. She was the first female F-14 Tomcat pilot, and she crashed trying to land aboard the Lincoln. Her backseater, she overshot the landing area. The left motor snuffed out. They rolled, and he pulled the ejection handle, and he got half a swing in his chute. And by the time he was out, she ejected straight down into the water. She was gone. Then one of my best friends, K9, night catapult shot off the Lincoln, flight control failure, disappeared. Boat more or less ran over. So then this one was national news. A good buddy of mine, Stacy Bates, call sign Sprout, took a Tomcat. When you need some extra cross country or flight time, you grab a jet in the old days and you go see your folks. You go take the jet home and see your parents. Well, he went home to Nashville to see his folks. He and his backseater left, Sunday. And of course, his family and the neighborhood came out to watch him take off. Low overcast in Nashville that day. He did what's called a low transition, getting down the runway, put the gear in the flaps up, stayed at low altitude, and got to the end of the runway and went straight up. Well, as soon as he went straight up, he was right into the clouds. And I think he thought maybe he was going to pop out of the clouds eventually. He didn't. He stayed in the clouds. So when he went to level off, they think, the whole inner ear fluid thing, instead of leveling off, he ended up pointing straight down. So he ends up popping out of the 1,000-foot overcast, hauling ass straight down, pulls about 10, 11 Gs to try and, save the airplane, and he pancakes right into a townhome. So he and Hobbs,
that's
the
incredible.
backseater are dead, and then I forget how many in a condo they hit. Like 3 or 4 people died in that mishap too.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then we lost a prowler, man. 3 dudes in a prowler got killed because the pilot blacked out. He grayed out, pulling G's off the Lincoln. So this was my introduction. This was my first fleet squadron. Hey, I'm a naval aviator flying the Hornet, and boom, 8 guys, well, 7 guys and a gal gone, man.
You're starting to
a
think,
little
I
messed
hope
up.
that JU education and that every riddle pilot school is going to pay off for me. I've had a
I'm
lot of
telling you,
good
man.
fortune
Yeah.
this far, right? Well, you know,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
I just interviewed a Marine the other day. He was a helicopter gunner in a Marine helicopters, and he's now battling brain cancer. But we were talking about how many people get hurt or die in training
yeah,
exercises, and they never get to see combat. And usually, then they have survivor's guilt because somebody else had to take
correct.
their place and go to war, and they got to actually because as we know, they
Exactly.
volunteered to go serve over there, and there's a waiting list. So I was like, knowing that you got hurt as the training exercise, but we train harder than we perform there, and that's kind of the
Correct.
idea. So he brought up some really good points about how to handle that, and that's one of those things that I like to talk to people about and say, listen, you got to understand, man, this is already predestined type thing. You don't want to get too hung up on the
Yeah.
details. But yeah, that's a crazy, crazy situation. That's a lot of money too, and a lot of people's lives. But that they
Yeah.
lost in a short period of time. Did that add a
Yeah.
level of intensity, or I mean, were you all of a sudden like way more aware of what was going on? Were you nervous when,
No, I mean,
like
not
I would have
necessarily. They did a great job in Navy flight training on day one, telling you everybody is trying to kill you, including you. So I always had a hyper sense of awareness, and always the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. But yeah, having that many mishaps in that short of a time definitely heightened my awareness.
even more?
I mean, most guys who fly for 20 years in the military don't even lose 8 guys total in 20 years. I lost 8 in about a year or so.
I've never
And
heard.
then over the rest of my fighter career, you can add another 8. I lost 8 more folks in mishaps. And then along the way, 4 suicides, 4 F-18 brothers ended up checking out due to suicide. So yeah, a lot of trauma. And then, like your door gunner guy, in the F-18 for 15 years, I sat a foot behind one of the most powerful transmitters on the planet. The amount of radio RF energy that, pilots have a rate of cancer that is through the roof,
Really?
Fighter pilots, because of the radar and, plus you're closer to God, man. You're zipping around at 40,000 feet. There's nothing between you and the sun but a little canopy. And then just the physical toll, landing aboard the aircraft carrier, go sit in your driveway in a car, have a crane take you to the second story and drop you. That's the equivalent force. That's exactly what it feels like.
And you're in a very small space too, aren't you? For like very uncomfortable long periods of time. I was told that sometimes, like when they would transition fighter jets from one place to another in the Air Force, these guys couldn't fly fast because they wanted to conserve fuel. They would go from like Japan to Australia, and they just had to sit in this little cockpit and just drive slowly for 6 hours or
yeah.
whatever it is. And I was like, wow, that's
I
really
flew from what was it, Hawaii to Fort Worth. I think it was 10-hour. It was a 10 or 12-hour flight. We were being dragged behind Air Force tankers. Whenever you needed gas, you went and got it. But man, you're not sitting on an airline seat, right? This isn't a first class seat, and you ain't getting up to go use the crapper. You sit on one cheek for an hour, then you go to another cheek. You inflate your G suit to try and keep the blood flowing. Because you can't have a cushion with an ejection seat. It's got to be hard. Because if you have a cushion and have to eject, that cushion's going to compress literally 40 G's in the blink of an eye. So you're going to have what we call seat slap. If you have a cushion and you eject, it'll break both your legs and you'll bleed to death.
Okay, that makes
so you have to, your thighs have to be flat against the seat, or it's gonna break.
That is so unhealthy for you, and all the other radiation. And like you said, I mean, that's just Wow, I didn't even think
Correct.
about the cancer thing, but so is it a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff that went on? I mean, just day-to-day flying, was that why the suicides? I mean, or I think of pilots as having the strongest minds in the entire world, especially fighter pilots. So to me, that's something that it surprises me that those would be people that would take their own life. And obviously that's our
Yeah.
passion. That's what we're here to talk about, and that's what we want to do in this world is stop this
Yeah.
from happening. And so understanding, I think, is the first step. And you have an
Correct.
understanding on a level that almost no one has. And so I think it's a perspective that I would love to know is what was it that was so bad as that they were so strong to be a fighter pilot, but they weren't strong enough to be able to say here or ask for
Yeah.
help.
Well, the immediate answer is we'll know when we join souls with them again, right? We'll
Absolutely.
know the exact
100%. We'll be
answers,
tied right
right?
back in. Yep.
Yeah. When we
I'm not saying,
transition
man, I
and
didn't know if there was just like an immense amount of pressure and then all of a sudden now they didn't feel it.
well, yeah. So I'll get into some of the reasons I think, but yeah, I wanted to lead with that is you never know why somebody killed
Of
themselves
course, of
unless they
course.
left a note type of thing. But
Speculation.
Um, in the F-18, I have a video on my Instagram profile where I'm fighting the jet on the edge of consciousness. So the human body was not designed to pull 7, 8, 9 Gs for years. When you fight the jet on the edge of consciousness, literally I'd fight it in gray out. If you've ever passed out before, what goes first? Your vision. You get like this tunnel vision. So I'd actually pull Gs, look at the bad guy, pull Gs until I'm starting to gray out and then ease off on the G to get some blood back in my head so I can see again. Okay, there he is now, and get back on the G, and I'd fight on the edge of gray out. That cannot be healthy for the human body. And then obviously the catapult shots, the landings, and the radio frequency stuff. So our bodies are very beaten up.
Yeah.
And you can't, it's funny because every squadron had like a flight surgeon. You had a flight doc, right? And of course, the flight doc would always tell us once in a while, like, hey, I'm your buddy, come tell me if anything's wrong.
Yeah.
That was the last guy on the planet.
You don't
that we
ever
went to
tell
talk
anybody.
to. No. So, if, hey, doc, I'm not feeling well, down. Hey,
Yep.
doc, I'm a little
Done.
sad, down.
Yep.
And that they'd end up taking away the one thing that actually was making you happy, which was, flying a fighter. So we wouldn't tell anybody if anything was wrong mentally or physically. And then obviously, it's a hard culture of drinking.
Right.
Tonight we drink, tomorrow we die. I'd be out until 2 a.m. at Naval Air Station Key West, out on Duval Street, and I'm waking up for a 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock brief the next morning, completely flying, not in the best.
Does that have anything to do with your call sign?
Yeah, well, I peed on my commanding officer down in Key West on a yacht when he was sleeping one night, and I was told that happened, so I can officially deny it. I don't remember.
I didn't do it. I wasn't there.
It has nothing to do with intelligence, trust me.
So that's crazy.
So you got all those issues going on, and then obviously you have home issues too.
Right.
Now I'm really old. I did 2 cruises, and I did the changeover, meaning this. My first cruise on the Lincoln, we had like sailor phones. You could buy like some card, and it was like $1,000 a minute to call home and say hi to your wife. I used to have to wait for the COD, man, the C2, and they'd say it over the announcing system, like mail on the ball.
Right,
and
right.
I used to get letters from my bride with the perfume and care packages and stuff like that. And then my next cruise on the Kitty Hawk, damn email, man, was awful. Now you're joined at home. You're not waiting for a letter from home. Now you're like, my wife's like, hey, I got in trouble with the base housing people because the lawn's too high. I'm like, mow the lawn. I'm getting a brief to go fly over Iraq. So I think, it's good in some ways, but it's really bad because now you're really tied to the home front. One of the guys in my first fleet squadron, the fly-in, when you fly off the boat, all 12 Hornets, you're coming home, you fly over the hangar, the wives are out there or the husbands, and it's just, it'll bring tears to your eyes, right? Yeah. Well, this guy landed and all the wives are running out to their husbands and his wife wasn't there. He literally went home to an empty house, man. She moved and took everything. And so I'm rambling through some of the things that can add up to why a guy or a gal would end up checking out, man.
Yeah.
And it's sad. I know you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. Our foundation's been helping some women and sadly men who have experienced MST, military sexual trauma.
Yep.
So there's just, man, for as many humans there are on this planet, I think there's as many reasons that some people decide, maybe these folks would be better off without us. And it's sad. But I'd wrap all those issues up together and just say, we need to do a better job at prevention. There's I love Tom Cruise, man. Great movie called Minority Report, where they had the Department of Pre-Crime, right? They'd get an alert before. We need the Department of Pre-Suicide, man. We need to catch these men and women before it's too late. And that's what I'm trying to do at the foundation. So long answer to your short question, man. I don't know, but you and I will find out when we're reunited with all these folks again.
I agree 100%. And I appreciate the insight because it actually really opened my eyes to a lot of things that obviously only fighter pilots get to experience. So it's not like something that, I could ever give any type of advice on. Whereas, excuse me, my situation, obviously I was going through the military. I suffered a traumatic brain injury, get out, VA's pumping me full of meds. And I'm suicidal. I'm not wanting to be here. I know people don't understand. I can't ask for help. Don't tell people there's anything wrong with you. Then I have to see therapists. Then they get me on all these drugs that are going crazy. And I've got spine issues, head issues. And now I'm facing this, I don't know what the heck is happening anymore. I'm coming or going. And so I figured out at that time, once I fixed myself, got off all the meds, and I'll tell you all that story next week when I come see you. And then once I did, I found holistic living, healthy living, plant medicine, and yoga, which unraveled the world of, there's a lot more things out there than what I thought. So then I was able to heal, self-heal, but also I was able to evaluate the process along the way. I've always envisioned from very, very early on, from that suicide moment to the moment now, and I still see it as a village and a processing center for veterans, where you go as soon as you leave the military and you're evaluated, you're loved on, you're a part of a veteran community. There's professionals there with plant medicine, with guidance counselors, and also tradespeople to help you get yourself prepared to be a civilian. Basically reverse boot camp, right? Let's unprogram the programmed and decondition the condition. And that way, when they're ready, some won't be ready to leave. So they go to a special place where they can continue to be worked with. And the rest of them get to go out into life, and we job place them and we put them in the right positions. And once they're qualified. So it's almost like you graduate to go back to the civilian world, which I think would be really important, because we're not even having conversations with these guys. And then we're literally like, one day they're in Iraq fighting a war. Next day they're being dropped back in America like, hey, good luck. And it's like, they've never paid bills. They've never known how to do anything because their parents took care of them until they went in. And that's all they've ever known. So now they don't speak the same language, because in the military, we speak acronym. So it's like, we need to get them trained on how to do the simple things, but also have conversations with them and keep them a part of a community. Because that was one of the biggest things. I lost all my brothers. I wasn't around my people. I didn't have that security blanket of feeling connected. And there's been so much scientific study out now that, that even with rats and cocaine, and they put rat in this cage and the rat would go to the cocaine water every time when it was isolated. But when it was with a group, never did. And so it's like, I'm going, okay, this all fits. And so obviously the project we're working on out there in Colorado, we've got these hemp dome homes, partnered up with some people out there, and we're doing some good stuff to get the veteran village going. And there's healers out there, and it's legal, and it's a part of their process. And I know you're in the process of working with some people to get it legalized here. Psilocybin, it works for veterans. It works for PTSD, works for any trauma victims, but we've got to make it available. It has to be something that we can use. And so, I love the state of Florida like you do. And I don't want to ever leave permanently. I'd like things to change here a little bit so that we can implement some of these things here. But until that happens, we still have a lot to save some lives. We still got to stop this craziness. So to me, it's like, all right, we've got to all work together. And it's been so amazing, the amount of people that I know and have collaborated with and combined our efforts, and people like you that have already pioneered basically how stopping this, and then you went through a rough time after you got out, had a lot of success, but also had a lot of trouble, which again is hard to believe that people with strength of your mind, and like you said, does anybody even know the effects of what all these G's do and the blood rush and the blood, like that's got to have such long-term So how did you end up finding your way into where you are now? And yeah, I know you 2 days ago was your rebirthday. Happy rebirthday. Absolutely
Yeah.
grateful that you found that day and that you're still here. Not only that,
Amen.
changing the world. So to me, you're a hero
Yeah.
in so many fashions. But tell us about what it
I
was that
appreciate it.
changed your entire world.
Yeah, well, sadly, it was 9/11. In 2000, like a lemming, I was following all the other Navy, Marine, Air Force pilots out the door to go be a rich airline pilot. Work 2 days a month and hang out with flight attendants. I mean, that was the gig, and I won the lottery. The lottery was getting an airline job, but also getting a job flying fighters on the weekend. So I got hired by the Hunters VFA 201 in Naval Air Station Fort Worth, and I got hired by FedEx. So I was on cloud nine, man. That was literally
That's
the
ideal,
best. That I was on top of the world, man. But it's funny, I hated FedEx, man. I was there
Really?
for like 10 months. Well, no, dude, showing up to Memphis at midnight and flying until 7 in the morning, landing in Scottsdale, trying to sneak to the hotel before the sun comes up.
Right.
Because once the sun's up, man, you're up.
You're not.
You're a caveman. Once the sun hits your eyes. So trying to sleep during the day in a hotel and, even though you got a do not disturb sign, housekeeping. I'm like, oh my God. So I remember being in the ready room. I came back from a FedEx trip and I'm like in the fighter squadron, like sleeping probably on the couch because I don't know what time zone I'm in. And one of my buddies threw his cell phone at me and he's like, hey, Whiz, I'm going to do a 1v1. If American calls, tell him you're me and you'll be there in a couple hours. I'm like, you son of a, these guys were sitting reserve at American and flying fighters. I'm like, done. So I left FedEx and I went to American. And the morning of September 11th, man, I was packing for my first trip as a pilot for American. And the wife came in and said, hey, you better look at the TV. Somebody hit the World Trade Center with a small airplane. And I'm like, I'm busy, woman. I'm packing. It's
leave me alone.
It's a small airplane and bad weather.
Right.
And, she gave me that look and I went out there and I saw what everybody else saw. Beautiful, not a cloud in the sky in New York City, but a massive hole, flames. And I'm standing there going through my mental aviation checklist of how that could have happened. And next plane hits, I'm like, we're under attack.
Right.
I immediately knew we were under attack. I ran into the bedroom. I still, I still have my American Airlines uniform in the plastic from the cleaners. I keep it as a reminder because I pushed that out of the way. I grabbed my flight suit. I threw on my flight suit, didn't tie my boots. I hopped into my old Porsche and I broke the land speed record getting out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth and got out there just as they closed it. They closed it like literally behind me and went to ThreatCon Delta. And me and another Hornet buddy made it out. We called down to maintenance and said, get 2 jets fully fueled, ready to go. We have any weps? We got bullets. Load them with bullets.
Yep.
And that's when the phone rang and it was the F-16 guys next door, the 457th Fighter Squadron, the SPADs. And they said, what do you got, Wiz? I'm like, it's me and Gruff. They said, well, we got 4 of us. Get over here in the command post and let's brief to get airborne and fly a combat air patrol. It was like Lexington and Concord, man. We were citizen soldiers, citizen aviators, taking control. My commanding officer at the time was a Delta pilot. I think he was airborne. We didn't ask permission from anybody, man. We were just executing.
We're doing that.
Since the Air Force guys are used to that type of stuff, they got armed and ready to go first. They took off. Gruff and I went to the end of the runway, waiting for them to land when they got out of fuel, and then we get airborne. But by the time they ran out of fuel, everything in the U.S. had landed anyway. So I bring that up because, a week later after the attacks, I got a mail mail from American Airlines that said, dear crew member, you're furloughed. And furloughed, is a polite airline term for laid off. Mm-hmm. So lost my job at American, man. And in the background, when I was on active duty, as you don't join the military to get rich. Nope. I joined the Navy to see the world and fly cool jets. But I was always interested in finance, from a young age. My dad would be reading the paper in front of me as I'm eating my Fruit Loops, and there's stock symbols on. That's how old I am. They used to post the stock quotes in the newspaper, he told me about it and how that worked. I'm like, he's like, if you go to Mom takes you to buy a Happy Meal today, and you own shares in McDonald's, you can make money. I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I taught myself on active duty how to trade stocks and options, and I was pretty good at it because I just kind of, when you think about it, trading's a form of combat.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to get their ass handed to them.
Yeah,
so I
that's
just kind of used all the procedures I was learning as an aviator, managing risk, contingency planning, sticking to a checklist, at exit points, or not being emotional about it. 90% of investing is emotional.
Right.
And as an aviator, you get emotional, man, you're going to end up, that's why there's jets on the bottom of the ocean, is they didn't fly the checklist, right? So after I got furloughed from American, I'm like, oh man, I got to pay the mortgage. I got a young kid, my bride. So I started trading full time, and my results ended up being really, really good. And I eventually popped up on the radar of one of the largest volatility arbitrage firms headquartered in the Chicago Board of Trade. And they called me up and said, what do you do? And I gave them a little taste, and they're like, yeah, come up here. We want to meet you, type of thing. So I actually took an F-18. I needed some flight time. I took it up into Winnetka, right? The owners of the firm lived in, like
the middle of nowhere.
some thing on Lake Michigan that looked like the Castle of Versailles. So I went there, and man, they laid an amount of money on me that I thought they added like too many zeros. I'm like,
I would have done one less zero, but okay.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, you suckers. I said, what? I don't even know what I do up here. And they're like, we just find good people and then we figure it out. So me and the missus, and now my middle son was born at the time. We went up to Chicago, and I helped run a multi-billion-dollar options trading firm in the Board of Trade. And it's funny because when I lived in Fort Worth and I was flying for the Hunters, we have commuters, right? United buddies who live in Denver, they'd commute in for the weekend to fly the F-18 and try and stay current. Whenever those guys came in, I was always giving them a ration of shit. Like, man, you're rusty. Don't kill me today. You commuters suck, Well, guess what happened? We moved to Chicago, and I became something I used to make fun of, right? I'd be flying down to Fort Worth to try and stay current, and the local guys are now giving me shit, right?
Right.
But here's why I bring it up, man, because I'm in a fighter squadron where you trust the men and women with your life, or they're just simply not part of that organization for much longer.
Absolutely.
And I'm also in a Wall Street firm,
right,
where you can't trust the men and women of that organization with your life. I couldn't trust somebody to watch my wallet when I went to the bathroom, man.
Oh.
I mean, these people, it was money. Somebody would, you pay them $1, they push their mom in front of a bus. So I got even further separated from my God, my mission, my community, like you talked about, the vet village type of thing. Man, it was me and my bride in Chicago, and Chicago in February is a survival situation. I'm a Navy guy, man. I need a beach and sun and sand.
Yeah, Key West was where you were, right?
Exactly. So I started spiraling the drain, man. And it's a culture of Coke and booze, and these Wall Street types, man, they don't mess around with their partying.
The Leo DiCaprio movie, right?
That's exactly right, man.
Wall Street, it's real. Huh?
Wolf of Wall Street. It's I don't think they were accurate enough. It was worse.
Really? They downplayed it?
No, my God, man. It was a culture of debauchery and focus on money. And then around the 3-year point, I remember the owners of the firm telling me, like, you stay here past 3 years, you're here forever. And that sounded like a sentence. I'm like, you know what? My Susie's from Boca. Well, I'm going to get her home after dragging her through some pretty crappy times. So we moved down to Boca Raton in 2010. And I started my own company called TOPGUN Options to trade options and teach people how to trade. But as we were down here, man, South Florida, going from Chicago with a little bit of a drug and alcohol problem to Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Oh boy, that didn't help.
You moved right into the den of evil.
It was a dogfight. Yeah, man. So I got a little worse down here, to be honest with you. But that's around the time when I lost 2 F-18 brothers to suicide, including my best friend.
Those 2 didn't count in the 4 that you told me about?
No, the 4 total. Yeah, these count in the 4.
Wow, that's
but the third one was around 2020. And, God takes care of fools, drunks, and sailors. So bases loaded for Whiz. In 2020, I had a buddy in the White House. He was a military aide. And in November of 19, he's like, dude, something escaped from a level 4, the only level 4 weapons lab in China. It's coming. They're digging up the highways around the city, and they're making mobile crematoriums. The world might end type of thing. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I actually did what I call outsider trading, because I remember a bunch of senators and people leaving the brief, probably that I heard type of thing, saying, everything's fine, remain calm, everything's under control. And then they got on their phone to their brokers and their buddies and said, what? Sell, get out of everything. So at Top Gun Options, I told everybody for weeks leading up to it. I bring that up because I wrote a book called COVID Crash: From Panic to Profit. I made $2.5 million worth of trades in like 2.5 weeks, almost the same time frame. It was insane. And I bring this up because of this. After that happened, and my wife and I, we made all this money. I looked at her. I'm like, man, who cares, right? We're not pharaohs. They're not going to put this in our casket.
Nope.
And my dad, it's not about the money, Matthew, type of thing. So I'm like, why don't? And right around that time, my third buddy checked out, and I'm like, oh my God. So I said, why don't we do something about veteran suicide? At the time, the government lie was 17.5 veterans are checking out every day. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know it was that high. Now we know it's closer to 22, maybe even double to 44. So I looked at Susie and I said, let's start it. Top Gun Fighter Foundation, big marketing department, right? Top Gun Fighter Foundation.
Absolutely.
So, she and I are standing in front of the whiteboard, like, how do you keep a veteran from killing themselves? Do you, help them with a resume, buy a suit, help them with the rent? And around this time, as I was trying to pull out of my nosedive, a buddy of mine is like, dude, you're going to die. You need some help. He's like, have you ever thought about yoga? And I'm like, dude, if I saw me in a downward dog, I'd kick my own ass. I'd give me a wedgie and take my lunch money. Are you insane?
You can't make a fighter pilot and a Wall Street
No,
trader. That's not even a thing. Like, the amount of humility is just not.
No, he's like, trust me, man. And of course, he appealed because I was not who I am today, so I could talk like this in hindsight. He's like grasping at straws to try and get me to go. He's like, where do you think the hottest girls in Fort Lauderdale
Exactly.
are?
I already know the sales
during the daylight, right? I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, you're
so. I go, of course, I don't know what you wear. I like walk in a yoga joint in Fort Lauderdale, like in running shorts and running shoes, right? And the girls at the desk could have been funnier. I'm like, it's my first day. And they're like, oh my God. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, it's a hot yoga, hot vinyasa. I'm like, look at these chicks do it. I'm going to crush this. I'm a fighter pilot. I throw weights around the gym. I hope nobody sees me in here.
That's right.
Man, I think at the 23-minute point of a 60-minute vinyasa, I was on my back in a fetal position, sucking on my thumb in a pool of sweat, right? I'm like, oh my God. It was I have worked out with Navy SEALs on the boat. I've done some. It was without a doubt the toughest workout I've ever done in my life.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
So I was hooked. I mean, after that, I'm like, it didn't kill me. I'm gonna master this shit and get better at it. And then I became friends with one of the instructors, and she's like, well, yoga's awesome, but you do breath work too, right? Or meditation, because this is, you're supposed to link breath work with movement. I'm like, I can't sit still for 30 seconds, lady. Right. And then I went on a meditation retreat up in Delray Beach for a weekend. I'm like, wow. Yep. So I got the yoga, I got the meditation, and then the world was going to end with COVID. We made a lot of money. So I'm like, Top Gun Fighter Foundation, how do we stop a vet from killing themselves? No clue. And around that time, a close friend who was helping me with the foundation said, hey, I just met these folks in Dallas. They run a foundation that has Navy SEALs and Special Forces guys. They go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic-assisted therapy. So I donated some money to these folks, and they're like, hey, there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you like to go? And I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs for a weekend with Navy SEALs. That sounds like a great time, man. Sign me up, full throttle.
Absolutely.
I had no clue what I was getting into. I mean, they did a good job briefing me to get ready and stuff like that, but you can't.
That's not what you heard, though. You weren't hearing.
No, I didn't hear any
you
of
were
that.
still doing drugs with Navy SEALs in Mexico.
Well, not only that, I'm like, dude, I'm a fighter pilot, man. I can, I can do anything, right?
Right.
Oh my God, man. So I flew into San Diego. Yeah, man. May 20th of 2021. I met Marcus Luttrell. Most folks know Marcus from Lone Survivor, the book, or the movie. JT, Jared Taylor from Black Rifle Coffee. John Jones, JJ. He was on the teams with Marcus, and then an NFL player, a veteran. His name's Robert Gallery. He was an All-American at Iowa, just made it into the College Football Hall of Fame, and played for the Raiders. And, if you do this in San Diego, you're a felon. If you do it an hour south, it'll save and change your life. So we meet in San Diego at this place, and we do a little convoy down to the clinic in Mexico. And I was in the car with Robert, and I was sitting next to a 6'7", 300-pound gray iceberg. This guy he'll tell you, man. He has a great podcast with Marcus recently. He's like, that was it. I was either going to kill myself down there or get home to Lake Tahoe. He was just in the car next to him in the back seat. I'm like, this guy's dead. I mean,
this all no
holy shit. Yeah. So we get down there, bro. And I mean, I'll give you the cliff notes. I mean, we sat with a medicine called ibogaine, which is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. It comes from iboga. It's root bark from Gabon, Africa.
Okay.
And it's got like 13 alkaloids in it. And in the West, we pull out one of the alkaloids called ibogaine. So we took those capsules, man, did a little fire ceremony, and upstairs we went. And it was the most challenging experience of my life. I've done some challenging shit. This is up there. It was a 12 to 14-hour experience. It was the most spiritual experience of my life. I don't know if we hit on this yet, but growing up, I made the Pope look Jewish, man. The Buckleys of South Philadelphia, South Jersey, Irish Catholic, altar boy, Catholic schools. One of 6 kids. But I thought at the time God did this, but my sister Monica, 19, she was a freshman at Villanova University and was killed by a drunk driver. And that was a claymore mine in the middle of our family. And I was going into high school at the time, which is a tough time for a young man anyway. My parents were done. It changed the arc of my life. So I lost my faith. I was also sexually abused as a kid. And I bring that up now because on the ibogaine healed all of it.
Yep.
My dad died years after my sister Monica, and everybody and my mom still say to this day, he died of a broken heart. He was 100%. Never the same.
100%.
But on the medicine, there was my sister Monica, and she was perfect. She was angelic. There was my father, perfect, angelic. And this was the coolest moment, man, because I was at peace. I haven't had decades of peace. I was at peace.
Yeah.
And then they started to leave, and it was a horror.
Yeah.
I started yelling and crying out. I'm like, don't leave. Don't leave me again. Don't leave. And they came back, and they looked at me, and they kind of smiled. And then they started to disappear again, but I followed them this time. And they went into my daughter, the trees, the sun, the ground, everywhere. They went into me.
Goosebumps.
And I was healed.
Yeah.
They never left. They are on this podcast. They are with you and me right now. Just a different layer of consciousness, man. So I was healed. But when I experienced what you can use whatever word you want to use. I choose to use the word God, man. I was in space, right? Comfortable space, not like, I'm like, I got home and I told Susie, I'm like, I never have to travel again. She's like, why? I'm like, I saw everything.
Right.
Everything.
Understand completely.
God gave me a tour of everything in creation as if to say, man, I can cook, or what can I? And by the way, you're a part of it.
Yeah.
A critical part of it, son.
Yeah.
Look at this stuff. So the first half of the iBegin experience was a tour. I've never seen so much beauty in my life. And then it transitioned to like hanging out in space. And I'm like, I didn't know God was giving the tour at the beginning. So we transitioned, I'm in the space, and I'm like, wow. And then, man, the biggest, whitest light was right there, man. And it emanated love and peace. So, of course, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what this thing is. I'm like, are you God? And no words ever were, it was all energy, right? God didn't have a mouth.
Exactly.
Just the answer of yes. And I just exploded. I felt like, I just felt oneness with God. And I remember kind of dropping to my knees and just crying. I'm like, I'm a horror. I'm a drunk. I'm not a good father. I'm not a good human. I'm not a good husband. I am so sorry. And just, not that God had hands, but just with like with a whatever, it was gone. Just in a wave. It's like 100-pound backpack just was released, and I was healed. And I'll never forget what God said to me. He said, Matthew, I don't make imperfect things.
That's right.
Get up and let me show you what we can do. And then the second half of that iBogaine, man, was just a review of my past and some of that traumas that just didn't even matter anymore. And he took care of that. And I saw parts of my future. I'm living my future that I saw 4 years ago right now. And I just can't even, it reconnected me with my wife. And there's so much stuff I can get into that we can save it. But man, I woke up, and it's funny because it was like a one-man luge. I didn't move for 12 to 14 hours. I think
you were still the whole time, huh?
I think at the 12-hour point, one of the hardest decisions I made in my life was trying to roll on my side. And it took like an hour to achieve a 90-degree.
The physical fit at all.
Yeah, I stayed eye shades on and I was in my cocoon, man. But Marcus and JT and those guys, I remember at one point they were in it, man. And I remember going, I got to help them. And God just gently said, Matthew, they're getting exactly what they need. Trust me. And I'm like, God, you're not listening to me, man. Listen, I got to help them. I'm an air guy. They're ground. I couldn't even roll over to help them, but I wanted to help. And God just gently, again, brought me back. And he said, Matthew, trust me. They're getting what they need, son. Let's go. And then we went off to do something. But I'm like, I remember trying to help them. But the next morning, it was Christmas morning, man. I'd say it was 12 to 14 hours, but it was that. And before I knew it, the sun was up and I'm looking out the window at the Pacific. I'm like, it felt like forever, but it felt like it was instantaneous. I can't explain it.
Understand.
But I was like a kid on Christmas morning, man. I flew down those stairs and I'm like, I'm healed, type of shit.
A new beginning.
Yeah. And I remember Marcus and JT, and I'm like, because man, I'm telling you, it sounded like there was some tough shit going on. And I'm like, you guys good? And Marcus is like, never better. I'm like, sounded like you were killing some demons. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, I was. And they're gone, type of thing. So, man, it was without a doubt the most incredible experience of my life.
Wow.
And then 24 hours later, however long, I did 5 MEO DMT. And man, as a 52-year-old at the time, I think I maybe tried to flip into the pool twice when I was a kid, and I always landed on my back. As a 52-year-old man in a clinic in Mexico, I flipped on the 5 MEO DMT. I did a kind of like the Whiz story. I don't remember doing it. They told me I did it because I went into the medicine facing the Pacific and on a beautiful day. And when I came out of that medicine, man, I was facing the wall.
Wow.
So I was reborn. It was a Millennium Falcon, man. I went from sitting on a mattress to instantaneous oneness with God. I have never felt, I don't know how else to describe it, but it was a infinite orgasm is what it felt like. But it also answered a question I've had for decades. as a young kid, I always used to think like, is my sister Monica bored?
Yeah.
Is she in heaven going, it's been like 2 decades. Where's everybody?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
there was only that moment, and it was infinite. I felt infinity, and it was only now.
Yes.
It's so hard to explain to people. You get it, but
No.
even sometimes when I lay in bed at night, I'm like, man, that makes no sense to me. But I remember that it did, and I was in it. But here's the cool thing. When I became one with God, we all are one with God, man. There is no separation.
Yeah, you already
Exactly.
were. You already
We are
were.
all oneness, right? But at a certain point, and I'm paraphrasing here, was kind of like, do you get it, son? There's nothing to worry about.
Right.
I got you.
Right.
But you got to go back.
That's
It's not your time yet.
You still have work to do.
You got work to do, man. But this should, do you get it now? I'm like, I got it. So apparently, I kind of remember trying to get back into this thing.
Yep.
This imperfect vessel.
Yep.
And there was still a little darkness or shame or regret or booze. And I remember the first yell. I remember trying to get back into this thing and it wouldn't work. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs. And my guide, they told me this later in the day, what the visuals were. They're like, and my guide, Cindy, she's like, I've heard this. I've read it in books. I've never seen it in decades of doing this. She said, you transcended. You were in a V on the bed and your arms and legs were moving in perfect symmetry.
Wow.
I'm like, I couldn't do that if you paid me. She's like, you
most talented, coordinated person on the planet. There's no way you could pull that off.
I could not sit in a V and move my arms and legs at the same.
No way. Not
She's like, you transcended, and I could tell you were, because as I told her story, that's how she let me in on the visual cues. When I was one with God, I transcended. Then she's like, yeah, you got into the fetal position, and you were red. And I think that's when I was trying to squeeze into this thing.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you yelled at the top of your lungs. And then you took a huge, deeper breath and yelled louder and longer. And before we even knew it, you flipped. And I'm like, oh my God. So I don't remember any of that, but I remember all of a sudden hearing a deep breath.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I didn't do that. And then I heard it again. I'm like, that still wasn't me. Maybe I should do one of those. So I took a deep breath and then I opened my eyes. I opened and there's 3 people, the doc, my guide, and a SEAL at the head of the bed. Man, they are crying. They look terrified. And I look at them. And I'm like, are you guys good? They're like, are you? I'm like, I've never felt better in my life. They're like, oh, okay, good. I'm like, why the concerned looks? And of course, they told me later about all this shit. Yeah. But, later at dinner, my guide, she's like, do you remember the first thing you said when you came out of medicine? I'm like, not really. She's like, you said, I can't wait to tell Susie I love her forever because I know what forever is now.
Right.
So I got free anniversary and wedding gifts for the rest of my life. Because that was a good nugget right there. But it was the truth. I'm like,
yeah, no.
When I say I love you forever now, I'm like, I get it. I know it.
What that means.
Yeah. So, man, I got home from that trip a couple days later. I changed the name of the foundation from Top Gun Fighter to No Fallen Heroes because the folks I went with were just focused on Navy SEALs. The only way I got to go was I stroke a check. Then there was another foundation doing something similar. They were only helping combat vets. And I'm like, I ain't no combat vet, baby. Right. I go out of my way to tell people.
Different.
I'm like, what about the aviation side of the house? So No Fallen Heroes Foundation, I'm like, I want to help all vets. And my mission took on a little bit more of a, full throttle because I love my SEALs. Usually it's a bunch of white dudes, right?
Yep.
When I got home, I called some of my F-18 sisters and some other female aviators, and they said, man, that sounds like some awesome healing. I'd love to heal. And I'm like, well, you got combat stuff. You actually saw some shit. You dropped bombs or got shot at. And the one lady, she's like, Whiz, it ain't from combat. It's from rape or sexual assault. And I'm like, Whoa.
Okay.
So I kicked over this MST, military sexual trauma rock. Wasn't nobody out there, they're focused on SEALs, they're focused on combat vets. I'm like, what about the gal behind enemy line? You expect the enemy to shoot you or try and kill you,
Absolutely.
or hurt you. You don't expect your squadron mate to do it.
Right.
So we really went big tent with the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. So veterans and first responders, man, a lot of guys and gals get off. I have a 20-year Marine buddy who's like, man, my Marine trauma is a joke compared to when I was a paramedic down in Miami.
Yeah.
What people could do to children or other humans was a horror.
Yeah.
So we help veterans, first responders, and families. We were the only folks to start with the families too. Gold Star moms or dads or spouses, they deserve to heal too, man. They've endured the most horrific sacrifice. So that's what we're doing now, man. The first 2 years of No Fallen Heroes would infuriate me. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm leaving this country with men and women who incurred trauma serving this land.
Right.
It would piss me off.
Yeah, every time.
Thank you to the voters in the great states of Oregon and Colorado. 2 years ago, we started doing our first retreats out there in Colorado, and then now Oregon, and then some other states as well. So one of my mission objectives since day one was to heal our heroes at home. So now we're finally starting to heal our heroes here in the United States. And then, real quick, my 4-year anniversary, man, I walked into the VA a couple weeks ago. There's no way in hell I would have thought I'd be walking into the VA 4 years after sitting with the medicine, but I had posted a pretty publicly pointed post at the VA secretary. Yeah. Well, and we have a saying in a fighter pilot debrief, if you're going to throw a knife, make sure you have a note attached.
Right.
I had a note attached. I had action items that I think we should be seeing. The guy responded to me publicly. He answered the tweet. And then the next morning I woke up and he's in my inbox like, Whiz, reach out to us, man. I'd love to talk to you. So I actually was heading up to DC the following week to go to the psychedelic medicine summit at the National Press Club. So I went to VA headquarters and elevator up to the 10th floor, meeting with some heavies overlooking the White House. And it's funny because a half an hour into the meeting, the lead heavy was like, she was texting and looking at me, but texting. I'm like, well, that's rude. I wouldn't do that to anybody.
Yeah.
Now I know what she was doing. She was making sure in that first half an hour I wasn't some sort of lunatic or
that message came across a little too
exactly. So after she put her phone down and kept listening to me, like 30 seconds later, the door opens with the secretary. He's like, Whiz, I heard you were here and I want to shake your hand. So I had a great talk with him and he said, Whiz, if anybody's going to do this, it's us. Yeah. And it's going to be now. They didn't do it for the past 4 years. The president wants to do this. In between, me tweeting at the VA secretary and meeting him was that cabinet meeting. I was blown away. Never in my 5 decades on this planet have I ever heard a commander-in-chief use the words veteran suicide.
Right.
And never in my life did I expect the response from the VA secretary in that meeting to be like, well, Mr. President, we're throwing a ton of money at it and it ain't working.
Right.
But there's some great nonprofits out there working with psychedelics. We're going to make sure it's safe and test, but there's some promise there. Man, my wife came running in the office because she thought I had a heart attack. That was it. That was my Stanley Cup. That was my Super Bowl moment.
That's amazing.
We're here.
Well,
yeah. So got back from that trip and here we are, man. I got hooked up with you and hoping we can fly formation and help save and change lives together,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what an inspiring and amazing story. I mean, people have a preconceived notion of someone that you would say, this is his resume. Yeah, he was a Top Gun fighter pilot, Wall Street, drugs, alcohol. Like you said, 52 years of debauchery and just horrible living. And now there's not a more inspirational person out there doing anything good in the world than you. I mean, obviously it's not about being the best, but it's about being a part of it. And I tell people, I'm not doing anything. It's happening through me because I'm willing. So this is God's work happening through me because I'm willing. Amen. And I'm open. And that's what I tell people. It's not me. I don't.
No, I'm robbing a village somewhere of an idiot. I guarantee you, man. I am just not.
I
You
liked you
know,
saying
uh,
earlier,
I,
fools, fighters, and whatever. I was like, that's brilliant.
fools, drunks, and sailors, man. Let me go back real quick to the alcohol and the drug part, man. I was a drinker, like we talked about, and I was not a good drinker. I'm Irish, and man, if I was tying one on, the wife and the kids are hiding. I'm ashamed to say that. Old Whiz was ashamed to say that. When I got home from sitting with ibogaine once, up to a year after sitting with that medicine, if I smelled alcohol, it made me dry heave. I'd throw up in my mouth a little bit.
Wow.
If I saw somebody drinking, I'm like, it made me queasy.
Wow.
A year. Now, 4 years later, if I want to have a glass of wine with my steak or some pasta, I can. But Old Whiz, a glass of wine was a code word for probably 2 to 3 bottles.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
not for everybody else at the table. So I can literally have a glass of wine and that's it. And to be honest with you, I end up having a headache the next day, and
You
it
don't
reminds
get
me,
anyway,
like, dude,
you're out.
you
Yeah.
don't need to do this anyway. So it destroyed alcohol in my life. So ibogaine has an incredible addiction interrupting capability. It's called noribogaine. I was a coffee freak, man. I couldn't even drink. My wife's having to buy decaf for like 6 months after I sat with the medicine. It resets everything. We got guys with porn addictions. They're like, dude, destroyed the porn addiction. There was a study years ago, 85% of heroin addicts who sit with ibogaine once, never, first of all, they woke up the next morning and ate breakfast. All of them were like, I haven't had breakfast since I was a kid, and I have no shakes. I don't have any withdrawals. I'm not jonesing for heroin. They stopped the study after 3 years because if you go back to using heroin after not using it for 3 years, it wasn't the ibogaine. So ibogaine has this incredible addiction interrupting capability. You know, out of my 5 guys, you know, the 5 of us that went the first time, I feel like the failure because the other 4 are like, I haven't had a drop since 4 years. I'm like, oh, great. I have a glass of wine with my ribeye and I feel like a loser.
You're okay with who you are, and you know that it's okay with
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
You know, you're not
Exactly.
control. You're not losing. You know, it's not like
No.
you said you have a half a glass and you're already over it.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, this was kind of, yeah, whatever. But yeah, I wanted to cover that too with the ibogaine, man. It'll take a global thermo nuke to any addictions that you have.
Now,
It's a
what are the
clean piece
chances
of paper, man.
What are the chances of us getting ibogaine? I know psilocybin is obviously close, at least in Florida, like, and now it's even closer because of you. But you know, what's the chances of ibogaine? Because that sounds brilliant.
So here's so the ibogaine, it's going to be a little bit longer of a sell. You know, psilocybin ain't no medical issues, you know, anything like that. So ibogaine has the potential. I forget the arrhythmia title or something like that. Like in between your heartbeat, it can lower it a little bit. So when before you sit with ibogaine, they do an EKG to make sure everything's cool.
Right.
You're on a heart rate monitor throughout the night. There's a couple nurses hanging out. You know, when I went to the Mission Within, there was a cardiologist guy who crashed on the couch overnight downstairs. Just you know, so it's an abundance of caution. But if you Google Stanford ibogaine study, Stanford took 30 SEALs and did all this stuff. They ended up giving them a magnesium drip IV throughout the night, and it fixed all the heart problems. So I bring that up because ibogaine in the U.S., you're going to need a little bit more infrastructure. You're going to need to do the screening and have the cardiologist and the EKG and stuff like that. Even though it's such a slim thing, you know, as military guys, we plan for the worst.
Right,
so if it doesn't happen, you know, it's good news. So, you know, Texas, a week and a half ago, $50 million ibogaine initiative in the state of Texas.
Really?
So, oh yeah, Governor Rick Perry.
Fantastic! Wow.
Yeah, Governor Rick Perry, who's 8-year governor in Texas. He's funny, man. He stole one of my lines. He's like, 5 years ago, Rick Perry running for president. If I heard me talking about psychedelics, I would have kicked my own ass. But because he's really good,
like,
good buddies.
I think that was me.
Yeah, that was my line, man. So yeah, there's a $50 million ibogaine initiative in the state of Texas. So ibogaine will get here, but psilocybin's already here, and it's a little, you know, man. It's a little pricey for the ibogaine, to be honest with you. When I went 4 years ago, it was $3,500. No, I'm not going to begrudge these for-profit clinics, but it's in the New York Times. It's, you know, ibogaine's the hot thing now. I think the place I went to is charging anywhere from 7,500 to 10 grand. And I'm a little not happy with that, because I have to think as a foundation leader, do I send one guy to Mexico for ibogaine for 10 grand, or do I send 4 of them to Oregon for psilocybin? I hate talking like this. I sound like I'm on Wall Street again, but I'm trying to heal the most.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. But if I had an unlimited checkbook, man, it would be ibogaine for everybody and toad. And I told the secretary that. I said, vouchers. Because he asked, he's like, Whiz, what can we do today? I'm like, reimbursement, man.
Yep.
If a vet goes to Mexico and comes out of pocket $7,500, cut him a check for $7,500, man. I get you can't pay the clinic because it's a Schedule 1. And
100%.
Why not reimburse these guys? They're saving you money on medications and doctor treatments and everything.
And curing a
problem. They fix themselves. You can't cut them a check. And
incentivize them.
Yeah, like what was it, a month or 2 ago when all the Doge shit came out? Like we're $1.5 million for a trans opera in Serbia. I'm like, if you gave the No Fallen Heroes Foundation $1.5 million, I'd clear most of my list.
Right.
But our government's sprinkling money all over in Mozambique instead of healing our heroes at home. So I hit the secretary pretty hard with vouchers. I'm like, I think we're probably close to $750,000 that we've given in grants. Stroke us a check for that, and we'll just copy and paste it to the next group of folks. So he was that sounded good, like that could be happening sooner rather than later.
I've got an idea for you. I'll talk to you after we hang up on here, but that could help a lot of people, really help a lot of people, and aligns with everything that you said. I want you to know, man, what an inspiring story. I can't tell you enough how grateful I am that you exist and that you are doing what you're doing.
Right back at you, man.
That you did. But on top of that,
one team, one fight, buddy.
We are aligned in so many ways, and I have so much to tell you that we're going to be doing some really big things, because where you've stopped, I've picked up or fit in, and when we talk, it's going to be like, okay, what? Because everything you said just made complete sense to me. Outside the fighter pilot stuff, but all the other stuff, like the experience that I had was being in a place of pure love, surrounded by the best emotions, and all the closest people to you in your life, with an energy source that was drawing you to it, but not pulling you towards anything. And it just felt like heaven, like the most beautiful feeling you've ever felt. And it was infinite at no time passing. So I
good for you, bro.
I love it.
That's awesome.
I've got some good news for you that I'll tell you secretly off the air. But thank you for sharing your story. One of the best ones I've ever heard. Definitely, I'm going to share it. Tell it. Also, we got to do it again, but we're doing it Tuesday.
Yeah, man.
Place. And I'm so excited to come down, man, hang out, get to know you more. And I think we can really make a difference in the world and make all this combined effort. It's not coincidence. This is God working through us and bringing us together. We have a real chance this time, I think, to really end this epidemic. And dude, kudos to you for reaching out to the families, also the first responders. I mean, to have the vision to even think that way, because I was the same way as you. I'm like, well, this organization's combat, this organization is this, and it's so specific. But to be able to just say, hey, we want to heal all of you. Like, I mean, you can tell you just got the passion for healing. So
I appreciate that. Well, and it's because of my bride too, man. She's a saint. She stuck with me as I spiraled the drain. So I wanted to put the ladder down and help her heal too. She actually, 3 months after I got home, I was like 3 months of get up, woman, let's go. Life's great. Everything's sunshine and lollipops. And she's like, oh, yay for you, man. So she actually, she went down
around for the last. She's like, I need to be healing, and my energies need to be healed because of you.
Amen. She went down to the same place I went. She did ibogaine's pretty hardcore, so she did some, a little heart opener, some MDMA, then psilocybin, and then they also did 5-MeO DMT. And she came home, man, and we've never been a better couple or parents or human beings. So that's why I'm like, these wives, husbands, moms, dads, daughters, sons, they need to heal too, man. So one team, one fight.
Absolutely. Well, that's a fantastic story. I think everyone's going to listen to this, because this is really powerful. And
I appreciate it. Man. Hey, real quick, if anybody, if you're a vet, first responder, or family member, or you know somebody who needs a little help, go to nofallenheroes.com. Up on the top right, it says apply for a grant. I got to be honest with you, man. We got a list that we're trying to work through as fast as we can. We're obviously donation limited, but at least get in our system, because we'll send you some resources. You know, the Veterans Guide to Psychedelics, so podcast.
Yep.
Because we treat this like a combat mission, man. This isn't like, hey, I'm going to do drugs in Mexico type of thing. We're going to
100%.
brief. We're going to do some good work. So if you know anybody, go to nofallenheroes.com and we'll get you started.
Absolutely. And on top of that, donors also get an incentive ride. Is that correct? So they got a fighter plane. So if you guys are looking to give money to this cause, this is the guy you want to give it to, okay? He gives you a ride in a fighter jet, dude. You even buy a fighter jet? Are they like on Craigslist or something? Where do you,
you can buy.
How much are they?
It doesn't get any more American than this, man. You can go buy your own fighter jet. Yeah. So we own. It's called an L-39. Yeah, it's an L-39 Albatross.
Listen,
if you go on.
Mind blowing.
Go on nofallenheroes.com, and up at the top it says jet flight.
I've been studying your stuff inside and out, so I know where everything is. And I'm telling you guys, No Fallen Heroes, that's where you want to put your money. Yes, I have a nonprofit, but I'm going to be working with him anyway, so don't worry about it. Go get your
one team, one fight.
Go get your incentive ride. But also,
we support other nonprofits too, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really want you out at the festival we're going to hold. I'm going to tell you about it after we hang up, because, the Living Man Festival is going to happen the first time ever. And it's this Labor Day weekend this year. And we just got the site up last night. But after we hang up here, I'll tell you all the ins and outs of that, because there's so much information that I want to give you and talk to you about. Okay. So thank you again. I'll make sure I promote everything of yours on the page, and anything you post online, please tag me in so I can share it, because that's, awesome. I look at the platforms we have as platforms to reach people, and we're all trying to reach the same people. So let's reach them. Let's get them. Let's do this.
You got it, my brother.
Namaste.
Thanks for having me, man.
Don't hang up yet. Okay.
Yep.